Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lounge. Today I am, of course, back after a 2-week hiatus, and the reasons for that, well, I just couldn't come up with anything, and I just wasn't doing a whole lot of purchasing those couple of weeks or whatever, so I just took it easy. But I am back, and obviously I am back with some very cool titles this time around. And since the shop just recently got a few more newer stuff, because they went to Kaboom Commons, I forgot which place in Nevada, but they did, and they had some really cool stuff, and I had to snag a couple cool books from, obviously I had to snag some. So what I'm left with you is at least 10 comics, something, at least a couple that I snagged pretty much around the end of August. And then, of course, around the beginning of September, a couple from the shop, and for the most part, some from online. That being a lone image book, newer title from a series that obviously I continue to get frequently, brand new. And then a couple back issues for Deathstroke the Terminator. So what I have you is some Bronze Age Marvel, some early 80s DC Comics, some 90s DC Comics, and a lone modern day new image book. So I will see you all after this. Since I mentioned that there is a lone image book, it is of course a brand new release, and since I pretty much hinted at which series it is from, it should be no secret, and I obviously will continue with this for years whenever it finally stops. But it is the brand new issue of Spawn. It is Spawn number 368. This is the final part in the most recent 5-part whatever story arc that is Hell Hath Arisen. Obviously, with me frequently getting these as brand new releases, I pretty much have most of the parts, but I haven't been able to get around to reading the last few parts here, so I figured culminate them and then read them around this month of October. So there you have it. Again, or actually it will be the month of October, but we're kind of getting there. You understand that already. So, read these in October. There you have it. Spawn 368. Alright, so now let's get into the meat of the matter. Some of the ones that are really cool that I picked up at the shop. This one, I believe I picked up in the beginning of September. But it's obviously it's the earliest since I've kind of had these stacked or sorted in year format when it comes to at least Marvel and then eventually into DC Comics. So this is going to be the oldest one. This is definitely the beginning of the Bronze Age for here, early 70s. But you know me, when it comes to buying a lot of early, I have to be selective when it comes to the pricing and the condition. This one was in fairly good condition since it wasn't my previous episode. I showed a Captain Savage and his Battlefield Raiders, which originally started as Captain Savage and the Leatherneck Raiders. But here, this is very much in the same vicinity as that same sort of genre. It's war, and it's fairly connected to Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos as well as Captain Savage. However, the character itself technically predates these two characters. This was one of the more lone Golden Age characters that I think was originally under when Marvel was Atlas, but I think they might have kept it when they were Timely. But I know they were this character came out at least during the Golden Age, maybe predating DC's Sergeant Rock. But Marvel wanted to resurrect this character after the cancellation of Captain Savage and his Battlefield Raiders. since it was to try and they wanted to continue that series, but they figured they'd leave it canceled, but they'd resurrect this character. Who I'm talking about is Combat Kelly and the Deadly Dozen. So this is issue number 3. This is the origin of the Deadly Dozen, not origin of Combat Kelly as it states, because we probably have already had the origin already in a much older book. But this is the origin of the Deadly Dozen, at least according to key collectors. But this was for $5, and I think for the condition, I don't know if it's going to pick up. I mean, other than what you see right here, I think it's going to pick up a lot better right there. See, there you have it. This little sort of creasing that you kind of see, these marks. That's really only real big damage you can probably see on the book. Interior-wise, I forget which page, but there's one of the pages that started kind of come off the staple. But other than that, there's no spine rolling, no nothing, and it's definitely not a mid-high grade copy, but it's more bordering on a low to mid-grade copy. So I think for these early 70s Bronze Age titles, the beginning of the Bronze Age, that are 20 centers, this is actually fairly decent shape for one of these, and you don't really find these in this good, at least this decent of a shape. So, and since this is more of a kind of a slept-on title, they do tend to fall under the crack. So this is pretty cool. So there you have it. Combat Kelly and the Deadly Dozen, issue number 3. Now, since I mentioned that this shop had finally gotten in some newer stuff that they had, obviously, after being at KaboomCon, they wanted to kind of at least sell what they couldn't sell there, and what they bestowed onto this shop was some really cool titles. And I was finally able to luck in to at least a couple that I've always wanted to grab. And this one right here is one of those Marvel creature characters that I've always been trying to really collect more of. But it is from the first series, but towards the end of the series, though, it's Man-Thing number 21. This technically would be considered the first cover appearance for the character Scavenger, who first appears in issue number 19. I have to relook and go back to the shop whenever they get done sorting everything out. They're resorting all the stuff in their shop, so I'll have to kind of go back and see if I will be able to at least spot number 19, because now I'm on the lookout for that one and any other earlier ones. But they're selling this one for at least $5, and obviously for the condition, even though it's not super high grade, it's a really good mid-grade copy, though. Actually pretty good. Even with the sort of minor blemish, a few minor sort of things that are kind of on the cover, like I wouldn't say complete damage, but just sort of maybe here and there some spine ticks. There's definitely, again, it's not a perfect copy, but for the at least during the period of this, like it's getting into it's still the mid 70s, so things are starting to get more higher in terms of for the quality. You definitely tend to find you begin to find more higher grade sort of titles, but still, even then, you'll find at least some, still 25 centers are not even that easy to find in high grade. So this is still pretty cool. You can, but again, it's still fairly tricky. But so this was again, for $5, this was fine. This was nice. And I'm just trying to dip more into the Man-Thing character, and I got at least one from the issue number 4, the first Man-Thing and Doctor Strange issue from the second series, and I have at least a few couple oddball ones, but like appearances and other characters comics. But again, you don't really find a lot, for me at least, I don't find a lot from his solo title, so this was really cool and it was great. Again, Gil Kane cover, Steve Gerber as the writer, and Jim Mooney as the interior artist. Again, in fairly good shape. I couldn't beat it for $5. I could not. Alright, so the last Sloan Marvel book. This is more early 80s, but again, we're getting to the end of the Bronze Age. And I've been wanting to try and get some pre-DC George Perez artwork. And just Marvel books in general. And this is pretty much towards the end of his time period to begin with. but it is Avengers 198. I always keep seeing this at the shop, but I figured I might as well snap it since not only is this George Perez artwork, and again, I do have to point out, compared to the Man-Thing comic, this might be in the least decent shape. I mean, it's fine, but there's definitely some things I noticed that are a little bit, some blemishes, and there's definitely some stuff that doesn't make it, close to being a high grade or a mid, at least close to a higher mid grade. It's definitely a bit more of a lower mid grade copy, but still fine. But the reason is that this is a appearance for the character Red Ronin, as stated on the comic, and I forgot the number of the issue that he first appears in, but I know the series. It is for the Marvel Godzilla series. So this was a character that was meant to be more of a villain for Godzilla, but then eventually Marvel kind of loses the rights to the Godzilla. But since obviously Red Ronin was their own character, they obviously had to continue in a way to use him, so they put him in some of these as either a villain for the Avengers or maybe other characters. So he would make very rare appearances since the Godzilla series. So there you have it. Just pretty much a cool book nonetheless, and again, for $5, I couldn't, and I always see it, so I figured I might as well snag it. There you have it. There's all the lone Marvel books that I got recently, and they are definitely more on the Bronze Age, and that's fine to me. I like some Bronze Age Marvel. So here we go. Let's get into the DC books. Now, again, there's 3 early 80s DC books. 2 of them are pretty much from the same series, and since you pretty much have kind of noticed them kind of dipping more into the Western, more and more into the Western genre. However, when it comes to Westerns, there's only a few characters that I'm really interested in, and this is one of those, and it's definitely one of the more popular ones, especially under DC. You guessed it, it's Jonah Hex. This one's definitely more of a low-grade copy, but I was able to get it for at least $1. But it's, again, number 46. And if I were to take the comic out, you're going to understand why this is more of a low-grade copy. Because on the front, it looks fine. Even though, again, it's not perfect. There's definitely some spine ticks and creases here. Maybe a couple there. But still, it's still presented fine. But it's the back, you're really going to see it. It's not that there's anything torn. It is freaking dirty on the back. Either way, I was able to get it for $1, and which is probably perfect for the price anyways. But I wanted it because it's just a great Joe Kubert cover, by the way. It's a really good Joe Kubert, especially on Jonah Hex. And I just wanted it. And again, normally I've been kind of, you can also see it's a newsstand. I've been kind of wanting to collect some of these early 80s DC books in direct form. But newsstand for whatever, and since I kind of want to read it, it's perfect enough for me, so it'll work until I actually find a nice direct edition for this book. Because that is some great Joe Kubert as usual, just great Joe Kubert artwork. Finally, the last Jonah Hex one. This one I think I got for $3, I believe. But this one's actually a direct edition. This is actually in really good shape. They had a couple copies. This was the nicest. But it's number 63. Great Ross Andrew cover nonetheless. Also, this is more of a shark-based cover. Since I don't know if there's a tag, but I know remember there's a tag for covers that feature sharks on it, and that's one of them. So that's a bit of a cool one. Again, in direct edition form and in really fairly good condition. This is more of a higher mid-grade than maybe a lower mid-grade. Because there's really, besides some small sort of spine ticks and maybe some small sort of issues there on the book, still, they're very small. Other than that, it's a fairly clean book, and I can't really find a whole lot of that's like purely damaging. So that's really good. I couldn't beat that, especially for $3. That's a perfect. That was a grab. Now, let's get into the last DC book, and this is the one that I picked up on the same day as the Man-Thing, and I've been trying to get into more of the Bronze Age horror books, especially on the DC side, and this is more early 80s. This is pretty much going to be close to the end of the run for this horror series, but this was a cool one, and it is Ghosts. Number 104. Of course, a great Luis Dominguez cover right there. Again, it's kind of cheesy, but it's cool nonetheless. Again, very very Hollywood sort of satire-ish, whatever, satirical. It is actually great in my opinion. It's a great cover nonetheless, at least one that tends to be slept on, I believe. But there's one thing that this book has going for it as far as key facts that I think overshadows the cover. And that's not, and for me, if there's one other overshadow I should bring up, this is still some fairly early Marc Silvestri artwork. He draws the very first story in this comic. And again, this is 1981. It's DC Comics. Before you'd ever go to Marvel and work on like King Conan for his very first cover, and on, of course, all the classic ones he would do. So it's fairly early Marc Silvestri. This also does have the first appearance, who would very much a short-lived host that would pretty much be the host for the tail end of the series, but that's the Squire Shade, was kind of an Invisible Man type character, but he would be the host, and be until issue number 112 when the series got canceled. So a very short-lived host, but this would be the first appearance for that character. Finally, the last thing that is actually the most notable thing is that since I mentioned Marc Silvestri, and I just showed you Spawn, and if you want to know who sent the fan letter that got printed this book, it's a fan letter written from Todd McFarlane. So this is one of the key facts that this comic really has that anybody even would recognize. Even it's a key fact that kind of also gets underlooked. But still, this got one of the fan letters written from Todd McFarlane. There's a few or more other DC books from this period where he would send fan letters for, or at least fan letters that would be printed in. But this is one of the ones, and they had it for $5. Even if it isn't super perfect, I don't know if you're really going to see, but there is a little bit of a potential. It's kind of like, it was almost down when I bought it, but I fixed it to kind of put it upwards to make it a little more fuller. But still, it's pretty much almost a tear. That's about it. Other than that, most of it is fine. Even if still there are some spine ticks and so on. And being a direct edition, it is kind of cool. So it more borders at maybe a slightly lower mid-grade, but it's more of a mid-tier mid-grade maybe at best. But still, some fan letter written by Todd McFarlane. So you can't go wrong with that. And especially for some early 80s horror books, yeah, I had to grab it. And they had some other ghost titles too. Some that were drawn by Ernie Chan and Luis Dominguez, of course. So there were some cool ones. And eventually, I'll go back and try and grab some of those. But yeah, I love I'm really starting to try and search for more Bronze Age horror books, especially DC. Finally, let's get to the last books. Since I mentioned Deathstroke the Terminator, I had to get these off of eBay because I needed to kind of fill out some stories within my collection. And so, the first up here, it is issue number 9. This is pretty much finally, for me, it rounds out the City of Assassins storyline, the one with him and Batman. It pretty much, it really began. It shot the relationship between Deathstroke and Batman. This was the 4-part story that really kicked that off, and pretty much was the reason why to this day Deathstroke tends to be seen as like a Batman villain. But this is the first story in that, and this is the end of that story. So part 4, but this is the first appearance of Pat Tracy as the Vigilante, though she's being drawn with the original Vigilante costume for number 10, where she is given her the most notable one, the one that be synonymous with Pat Tracy. But this is it. First issue with Pat Tracy as the Vigilante, who would take over from, the death of Adrian Chase. So there you have it. Number 9. And then, of course, here is number 11. Since this pretty much finishes off a 2-part story that, again, starts in number 10 and then gets in here. This pretty much establishes the relationship between Pat Tracy and Slade Wilson. So there you have it. Great cover nonetheless. So there you have it. And finally, here is number 13. This pretty much ends off the storyline that kicked off in Superman number 68. and pretty much continued in Deathstroke to Terminator number 12 and culminates in number 13. And with this story, this is where it would eventually lead into the Total Chaos story, which would be a crossover event that spanned from this series to the Teen Titans and then the very brand new Teen Titans. So there you have it. And again, it's because of this book that pretty much establishes or at least first establishes the relationship between Deathstroke and the Justice League. At least not for partnerships, but for other, again, being battles and so on. This was the first one that would actually hit. I mean, though technically it's Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, and Aquaman, still, this is the one that really kicks that whole thing off, that whole sort of storyline and the continuity between Justice League and Deathstroke. There you have it. There's all the comic books I'm going to show you today. If you have any thoughts on any of the ones I just showed you, you can all leave them down in the comment section below. But if you want to continue, again, if you really like what you see on this channel, if you want to continue keeping up with what I release and so on, hit that subscribe button, because it's not going to do me great, but it's going to do you great, because you'll never miss out on any brand new content. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed. Keep on collecting, keep on hunting, and just keep on reading comic books, everybody. Take care.